Hi, this is Henning from FlippedNormals.com, and in today's video we are going to be covering how we can create different kinds of portrait light setup using very simple techniques such as area lights and light blockers and a few others. We are going to be creating this one, and this one. So they're going to look very different, and we're going to be using different techniques, and hopefully this is going to teach you a lot about lighting in Arnold. I do recommend you check out the other video we have on lighting as well that we just released. This is a continuation of that. So we're not really going to be talking about the lights themselves. This is going to be more how you can practically apply the lighting knowledge we covered in that video. Now, before we get into the video, make sure to check out FlippedNormals.com, which is our curated marketplace focusing on really high quality tutorials and assets, reference packs, and everything else you might need in order to create awesome CG models. Like this amazing course by Erdt, Advanced Character Creation with Erdt, where you will learn how to create a character like this. It's incredibly rare that somebody like Ben, who's a very senior veteran artist currently at Blizzard, shares his workflow for creating assets like this. So go check that out, link in the description. So in Maya, we have our model, which is just in a nice little model group. And then we have a camera setup, and we have Arnold loaded, and we have an empty light group where all lights are going to go into that group. The first thing we are going to make is a very standard 3-point light setup. This is something that you can use for pretty much all your models. There's nothing too controversial about this. It's going to look great at the end. And you can just keep reusing this setup over and over again. And then we'll get into something slightly more spicier at the end, like you can see in the beginning of the video. So we are going to be starting off with a key light. This is the key of the 3-point light setup. The 3-point light setup has a key light, which is the main light source. It has a rim light to separate the character from the background, and it will have a fill light as well, just to brighten up the darks. So we are going to go to Arnold, lights, and then area lights, and then we are just going to rename this to E right away, and we're just going to group this. I'm going to call this L1. This is just because this is the first light setup. Then we are just going to go in here, and then we will have to just scale this up and move this into position. The first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to increase the exposure a lot. I'm just going to set this to 10. This exact value doesn't matter at the moment. This is more so we have something to play with. And then I'm going to be just starting to light this like this. We can just see what this looks like at the moment. This is just very nice and simple. So we are going to move this a bit up, and we're going to make the shadows sharper. The reason I'm moving this up is so that we can have shadows going downwards, so they can go down from the nose and going towards the screen, right? So we are just going to move this up like so, and then we're going to make it smaller. Making it smaller is going to make sure that the shadows are a bit sharper as well. So just moving this over a little bit like so. Also, I'm only using CPU rendering here. I'm not using GPU at all. I find that Arnold is far too unstable when it comes to GPU rendering. All right, just finding a position that works pretty well like this. And then we're going to have to adjust the intensity of it. So it's way, way, way too dim. So we are just going to try a value. Let's try like 13. That's pretty good, actually. So I like this a lot. The advantage of just making it really bright like this is you can really just see the shadows. It's a little bit too soft though, so I'm just going to make it a little bit smoother or a little bit smaller. You can see here, the smaller it gets, the sharper the shadows get, and the broader or the bigger gets, the smaller or the broader the shadows get as well. So already here you can see that this is starting to just look pretty nice and comfortable. And then we are going to create a rim light, which I'm going to do just simply by selecting this light and just moving this over by holding on the shift key. This is going to clone the light. And then we're going to move this to the other side because I want to bring it up from the background here. So we're just going to do this, just scale this up a little bit. And you can see which way it's facing, so we can very easily do that. And just move this into position like so. And now we start to see this, it's going to start to separate out from here. What you can do as well, you can hit the plus key just to make the gizmo a little bit bigger. It's a bit easier to see what's going on. So now you can start to see that it's starting to separate out from the background. You can just make this a bit bigger to make this shadow softer. And now you can start to see we're getting this nice rim here. The way I'm thinking about lighting is I consider this to be a theater stage, and I'm using all the tools I would have on a theater stage, which in this case would be just like light boxes like this, and it might be spotlights, it might be light blockers or anything like that. But I'm thinking about this in a very practical manner. It'd be like, in this case, there is a statue here, and I have to light this to look as appealing as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean as beautiful as possible. This could mean that it needs to fit the emotional quality of the scene, because what we're doing now is fairly standard portfolio lighting, and it's going to look pretty good for a generic portrait. But it's not going to work for some kind of The Shining moment, right, where you need some kind of crazy backlit or lit from below, or exorcist lighting or anything like that, or maybe even like dreamy lighting. So you always have to light based on what the scene requires. Also lock down the camera before we start lighting, and light based on the camera. So this is looking pretty good. Now we need to do a fill light as well, but I find fill lights to be a little bit boring, to be honest, in case of just doing like just duplicating something around. So I prefer to actually use an HDRI for this, because HDRI is going to break up reflections very nicely. So Arnold, lights, and skydome light, and we're just going to call this HDRI. I always use an HDRI when it comes to lighting portraits, to be honest, because it just gives me so much life into the character. Then we go to color and file. And then I'm just going to pick one called the Abandoned Workshop 2K. This is all from Polyhaven, which gives you amazing and free HDRIs. So we're just going to put this here, and then we're just going to set the intensity very low, like 0.1. We just want this to give it a little bit more natural reflections, and just to break up the darkness a little bit. But currently we can see the background, which I don't want. I want to just go down here and just make sure we can't see this at all. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to create a background, because currently this is black, which might work fine. And if you're doing anything in post, this means you can control this perfectly. But the problem is that then it is just black in 3D, and I want to make sure this looks a bit better. So I'm going to make a plane, and I'm just going to put this in the background. So we're just going to move this up like so, and then we're just going to put this guy in the background. And what I'm going to do is to put this a bit further in the background, because again, we're lighting from one shot, remember? So we're not lighting for some kind of VR experience or something. This is the shot we have, the camera is locked. So by putting this further back, it means we can light this independently from the foreground, which is fantastic. Then we are just going to kill the history, Shift Alt and D, and then I'm going to be assigning a new material, which is just a standard surface, and we're going to kill the reflections on it as well. So just set the spec all the way down, because I don't want this to have reflections, because this is it's just going to look messy, so I'm not controlling it as much. So I just want to use this here as a really matte board, so we can use just to light this up. So then we're going to take one of the lights. We can just take this one here, the rim light, and then we are going to rotate this around. And then I would just want to put this a little bit in the background, like so. So just put this back here, and then I'm just going to increase the intensity by a lot, so you can see where this thing is, because this can be really hard to actually see exactly where it is. So just scale it down a little bit, and just so we know where it is, we're just going to move it a little bit closer as well, because now you can start to see that we get this nice gradient behind his head, which is awesome. It means you can really get something nice. And it looks like we're missing a little bit off there was a little hole up there, a little bit of gap. So then we just go in here and we just move this down. And then we can move this a bit further back to make it bigger, or we can just move it behind his head. And then we're just going to make this way, way, way less in terms of intensity. I just wanted to be separated a little bit from the background. We can try like maybe 15. Then we're going to rename this to background. And then we're going to have a look at the different lights, because it's a little bit unbalanced now. It's too balanced. We need to just make some parts darker, so we can just go in here and just turn them off one by one. Turn off the HDRI, see what happens, and this makes it look much nicer when we turn this down. So we're just going to set this to something even lower, 0.01 maybe, just so we have a teeny tiny bit of this in here. And then we're just going to let this render for just a little bit. Oh, what we need to do as well, we need to change the samples to 3 as well. If you don't do this, there's just going to be noise in the image. You really want to be sure that you change samples on the lights themselves and not just in the render settings, because if you just put them in the render settings here, then you're just going to have an insane amount of samples for the scene. So really make sure to change the light samples here directly. And there we go. It's not done rendering, but it's looking pretty good. And this is a fairly standard setup in terms of a 3-point light setup. You can use this for any single kind of character you have, where we have a key light to make sure we block in the main volumes. We have a rim light to separate out from background. We have a fill light, which would be, in this case, the HDRI. Technically not a fill light, but no, kind of a fill light. It helps break up some of the blacks here. And then we have a background, and we have something on the background. This is something I realistically probably would have done in Photoshop or in something like Nuke if you're doing videos. But you know, this works pretty well. So with it said, let's move on to the next one. So we're going to be hiding this one here, and then we are just going to be making some new lights. So for the second one, this is going to be very simple. We are just going to be using one single light. So I'm just going to make a new group. You can say Control-G for that. So this is going to be L2. And I'm going to show you how you can make a very powerful light setup using a single light. It's really cool that you can work in such a simple manner. So create lights, and this is going to be a spotlight. And we are just going to scale this up a little bit and move this down like here, and then we're going to move this down here, and we have to move this guy in, and this is also just going to be a key. It can be named the same as other objects because it's in a different group. So I'm just going to put this here so it's above, so we can see a little bit of what's going on, and then we're going to go to Arnold here, and we're just going to change this again to something like 14 or 10 or something like that, just so we can play around with this. And now you can see it's a very sharp line right away, and the light is indeed working. It's actually really cool looking at this, because what you're seeing here is you have this really beautiful bounce light from here. So if you have a really nice model with tons of areas like this, you can get very cool bounce light just by playing around with the lights. So for this, we are just going to be moving this so this goes a bit more like here. You could have also done this very much just using an area light as well. That would have worked totally fine as well. So we're just going to move it up like so, a little bit like this, and then we're going to change the cone angle. So this goes down a bit like so. Just going to find an angle that works. So from this, and we're going to change the penumbra angle as well. So this gets a little bit softer, a little bit nicer. And then we're now going to have to change the intensity as well, or in this case, the exposure. So we're just going to hold and control and just drag like this, and now you can just change the exposure. Like so, by just control dragging in here, you just control the values in a really nice manner. What you can do as well, you can go into panels, look through selected, and this is really cool. Now you can actually see through directly where this is going to be, and you can very easily control this. This is something I don't actually use a whole lot, to be honest, but it's still a really cool way of working. And honestly, this is kind of it for this light setup. You can see here how simple it is when you have a light that you know kind of where you want to place. This is very similar to if you're on a stage and you just have one light that's placed well from a spotlight, and light operator can just shoot that directly towards an actor. And you often don't necessarily need more than that. I'm just going to change the samples as well, and then we can also just change the radius a little bit, just to change the softness of the shadows just a tiny bit here. You can see the shadows here get a little bit softer, which is quite nice. And yeah, this is it. It's a nice simple light setup. So let's move on to the next one. Just going to be hiding this one here. The next one is going to be a bit more complicated. So we are going to just move the L2 under the same group. So we have it here, and then we're going to do the same thing as before, just L3. So you can very easily see this one. That was L pound. It's not where I want it. So just L3. And then just moving this into the light group as well, like so. And then we're just going to move this into position, like so. And then we have the plane, and this plane here we're going to be using in both the first one and the third one. So instead of just having one plane that we keep reusing over and over again, I'm just going to put it into the specific ones, because this gives me a lot of extra control with it. It means, for instance, that we can have white light set up here with one plane, and then we can have one here. We can just move the plane around. So you actually have two planes that you can just move around, so that by doing anything in the third one, we're not messing anything up in the first one. So for this one, we are going to be using blockers, which is fairly similar to how you would be doing this on a film set as well, where you just have, they're called gobos, where you just put stuff in that blocks the light. You can also do this with a texture map on the light directly. So what we're going to be doing now is we are actually going to be using a directional light. So this is going to be under create lights and then direction light. And we just have to scale this up. And like you might have seen in the other video, a directional light the only thing that matters in the direct light is the rotation, and nothing else is relevant. Arnold, and then we set the exposure to, again, 10, 14, or something like that. Doesn't matter a whole lot. We just want this to be bright. In this case, it seems like it matters a whole lot. But yeah, we just want this to be bright and nice, because we need to block in where the blocking actually happens. So I'm going to duplicate the plane here now. And then we're going to block this light with this. So we're just going to put this behind the camera, because obviously it has to be behind the camera. Otherwise it would be blocking the camera. We want to just be blocking the light. And then I'm going to be taking a loop here. And then now you can start to see something cool. That if we just start to move these guys into place, you can start to see that we can control where the light goes now. And I want to go something like this. And then we take the other one here and we just move this into position as well. And there we go. Now you can start to see that we have a little slither going through it. And then we can take this and we can rotate this around. And we probably have to just spend a little bit of time just trying to find the exact line we wanted to go through. But something like this is actually really cool. I like this a lot, but you know, up to you. I kind of want this to go over his eyes a little bit as well. You can just change the position a little bit for this. Just you can rotate this the other way as well, just a little bit. It's a bit hard to find exactly what works or not for this, because this is entirely subjective. But this is a very cool way of lighting, because it means you can really just get this nice slither going through the whole thing. And then we're going to change the angle of it. So we're just going to make this go up a little bit. I just want this to be a little bit softer. You don't want it to be crazy soft, though you can do that, of course. This can look quite nice as well, but I want this to be a lot sharper. So probably something like 0.3, 0.4 in that area. And then we are going to change the color. And this is going to be bright, bright, bright red. So we're just going to pick this red color here. And that actually looks quite cool. Then we're going to just change the intensity and the exposure, because this is far too bright at the moment. And then you can see there's a little bit of shadow here on the background, so we just have to move this away as well, just to make sure this doesn't cause any issues. And then it causes issues here, so then we just take it and we just scale it up like so. Easy peasy. And now the whole thing is a little bit too dark for me, so I need to create some area lights so we can just make this a little bit brighter, just to have a little bit of fill. So I'm just going to put this pretty much directly in front of the guy. And then we're going to just, again, change the exposure. Now we can probably get away with something like maybe like 4 or 10. Let's see what happens. So this is just going to block it. I'll make it a bit brighter as well. So 10 is actually quite nice. And then I want to make the color a little bit different. So I want to make this like quite cyan, just to have a bit of a contrast with it. You can see it's quite subtle, but I think it looks quite nice as well. And then we need to brighten up the background, because this is far too dark. So we just go into the background, and I just want to make sure we assign a new material to this guy, because we don't want to have the same material as for the other ones, because then it's going to change that one as well. So we just go under specular and just remove all spec, and that's kind of it for the background. You can see here now that by changing the intensity of the background as well, it actually bounces, a lot more light is bouncing back. So if we were to disable this now, you can see there is no light bouncing back, and now you can see it's going here. If you want this to be perfectly red or not, that's entirely a taste matter. It can look quite cool if this is just entirely black as well. This is what I mean with the whole, this lighting here isn't necessarily better than the other one. So this is just quite different, because the lighting here can look a lot moodier, might fit in a horror movie or something, but the lighting we had in the first one is much, much better for a portfolio piece, and the second one might be great for a specific shot in a short movie. Same with this as well. If you were to use this kind of lighting for a portfolio piece, people will go, looks cool, can't see anything, don't know if the asset is good or not. So that's always something to consider. But yeah, we're just gonna make this way bright again now like this, and that's kind of it for the lighting. Now you can of course experiment a lot with this as well, because you can see a lot of different effects here. Now it seems like my Arnold is blitzing out a little bit here, so if that happens, we just go under render and just update the full scene. We might just have to move the viewport around, because this seems to be just a viewport bug. And there we go. I just had to shake this around a little bit and then it worked. So what you can do, you can start to play around with this a lot. Now this is where lighting for me becomes really fun. You can also animate this, right? So you can just take a simple transform here and just move this around from one place to another. And then you actually can just animate the lighting going over like so. Maybe it's almost like a laser going over it or something like that. You can go around and change the angle of this kind of stuff and just have fun with this kind of stuff. I think this is such a fun way of lighting because you're really blocking things out and you're controlling the lighting. So looking at this kind of stuff, it would be quite hard to imagine how you would light this if you don't know about blockers. But the moment you know about this is honestly quite simple. So we're just going to do another render of this one here now and let this go for a little bit. So that's really it for this video. To sum this up, you can create very simple and effective light setups with just a few lights. As a little tip, if you are getting stuck with lighting, I highly recommend that you just delete your lights and you recreate them. I consider this to be essentially lighting yourself into a corner, and then when you start to just fiddle with things, it's not going to work. Start with big shapes and work from there. Start to block in strong volumes in the light. Try to get a good level of balance in the lighting. Try to get either the majority in highlights or the majority in shadow, and then work from there. Be very graphic about the shapes of the lights you want, and then add color later on. Only start with values and add color later on. And make sure the samples are set to 3, and you can do so much with just a few simple lights. So yeah, that's it for this video. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Tons more 3D content coming, and we also have obviously a bunch of stuff on our channel already, so be sure to check that out as well, and check out FlippedNormals.com for amazing training and resources and everything else you need as a CG artist.